Okay, Michael, if you want to start us off.
All right, well, is this on? Yeah. Well, first off, I want to thank you all for having me here. And then the second thing I want to state, and I want to state it as loud as I can. This is a solvable problem in Asheville. We can solve this problem. And, you know, I have had the pleasure of serving those that are most vulnerable and are in need in our community since 2007. It is a frustrating problem for all of us when you see what's taking place throughout our city and throughout our county. At the rescue mission, we house about 140 men, women, and children every night. But currently we have 110 individuals that are living with us right now, staying at our shelter, that are working or in school every single day. We have over 35 of them that have saved over $12,000 and still can't find housing. Now, they have come through our programs. We've helped stabilize them. We help them with not only health care, but mental health counseling, traumas, and they're stable and they're ready to move forward. The problem that we have isn't that we don't have enough shelter beds. And I'm gonna make sure that I say that out loud, because all of a sudden there's now a movement to produce more shelter beds. I don't have a problem with another shelter, but that's not the solution to our problem. What we have is that we have people that are ready for safe, affordable housing, and there's none. And let me say this, when we're talking about affordable housing, I'm not talking about the definition that both the city and the county uses as affordable, because that does not address the people who we serve. It's gotta be deeply affordable. And the only deeply affordable housing out there, I say only, but the large majority of it is unsafe. I will make this statement, and it's a controversial statement, but I've been saying it for 10 years and I'm asking somebody to prove me wrong. We have the low-income government subsidized housing that we have in Buncombe County is unsafe. And people deserve a safe place. And so when someone's in poverty and they end up in one of these housing communities and they don't feel safe, they give up everything else because all it's about is survival at that point. And we have to fix this. And this is a community issue that can be solved. I'll make this one statement and I'm gonna yield my time, because I'm sure I'm gonna have a few questions. Let me say, panhandling is illegal in North Carolina. It's illegal in Buncombe County. If we'll deal with the panhandlers, and we have panhandlers now that most people, when they see someone on the side of an exit and they see someone holding a sign, they don't understand the underbelly of what's taking place. We deal with people every day who tell us about the organized trafficking that is taking place within our panhandle. There are people that are being trafficked by drug dealers and drug cartels to stand there and to collect money to continue their habit. And that's happening right here in Asheville. So it's not just that person standing there saying that they're hungry, saying that they have nowhere to go. And it's a continuation of of what we would consider small crime, but it goes into bigger things. If you drive down Tunnel Road, towards the end of Tunnel Road, where Lowe's is, you'll, just last week I counted 18 shopping carts along the sidewalks. Now that's costing businesses money. I'm standing in Lowe's back in December, and I'm at the customer service desk, and all of a sudden, guy pushes out a cart that has 3 hoverboards in it. Alarms go off, and on the other end where the lumber is, another guy did the exact same thing. And I look and I say, are y'all not gonna do anything? They said, this happens every day, 2 or 3 times a day. But there's nothing we can do. As a retail business owner, they deserve better. Our law enforcement's hands are tied, because I would be upset if they're not getting supported, especially from the judicial system. And I will say, and I've said it again, I think our Asheville Police Department and our Buncombe County Sheriff's Department are some of the best in the state. I work hand in hand with them, but they need support that they're not getting. I'll yield myself.
Thank you, Michael. So next we'll have Asheville Police Chief Captain Mike Lamb.
I think I was just promoted to chief.
Okay. My vote.
So I'm Mike Lamb, I'm a captain with the Asheville Police Department with the Community Engagement Division. So that means I have the school resource officers, our housing officers, and also our community resource officers. So my division is tasked with hearing the community complaints, and then also addressing quality of life issues, which is a struggle now because I'm supposed to have 8 officers and a sergeant within the community unit. I have 2 officers and a sergeant. I have no housing officers because they've all resigned or been reassigned back to patrol. And then I have 3 school resource officers when I'm supposed to have 5. Now I know our time's quick today, so we will hang around afterwards. I also brought with me Captain Jackie Stepp, our patrol captain in the back, Captain Brandon Moore, who's over our recruiting and hiring and internal training, and then also Lieutenant Brian Griffin, who's my lieutenant in the community unit. So if we're not able to answer your questions during the panel, please come up to us afterwards, because we really want to make sure that you all have your concerns heard by us so that we can address them. So I was asked, oh, and I also want to say I appreciate Pastor Woods. His program has consistently created an environment that is safe for everybody. And also there's accountability there when there hasn't been accountability in other places. So we appreciate that. So I was given 4 questions. The first question was, what should you do when a crime or vagrancy occurs on your property? And how to address that. So just looking at crime in general, if you have a crime that is in progress that is happening, whether it be a violent crime, a property crime, or a trespassing incident, call 911. A lot of folks are not calling, the police department because they think we will not respond. There's a lot of misconceptions out there as far as what we will and won't respond to. So if there's an in-progress crime that is occurring, please call 911, explain to the dispatcher what's going on. Another thing that is really important to explain, especially with any crime, is that you are a witness and that you are willing to prosecute. In the video, it talked about a permissive environment, and that's what we have within the city right now, is a permissive environment. And we need to change that culture, and that starts with you. That starts with our citizens, that starts with our business owners, that starts with people visiting Asheville, is that if you see something that's concerning, say something. I don't know if y'all, how many people watched the TDA chamber meeting the other day? It was live streamed, and then a lot of you were there. But folks were talking about seeing people chase other people with a knife. That is something that we need to respond to. somebody attacking somebody with a 2x4 and beating up a car with a 2x4, that is something that we need to respond to, but we're not getting a lot of those calls. So if somebody's trespassing on your property, it's important that you say, I want to prosecute, because our hands are tied if you're not willing to prosecute. We cannot, if that person does not want to leave, we cannot make that person leave unless that property owner is willing to prosecute. So then you have public property versus private property. So public property is where we have our camping ordinance, we have our 24-hour notice that's given. So those are, public city property, DOT property, parks, stuff like that. So whenever it's private property, that encampment policy does not apply, because that's your private property. Imagine somebody coming into your house setting up a tent in your front yard. What would you want them to do? Well, you wouldn't want them to stay in your yard. So it's important that you call, you say, I'm willing to prosecute, and then we will enforce trespassing immediately in that case. So it's important to understand public property versus your own private property as a resident and in a business. But it's also important to understand the difference between so homelessness is not a crime. Being homeless is not a crime. So it's important that when we get a call, that we're able to discern what crime has actually been committed. And so we want to separate that illusion of crime just because of somebody's appearance to the fact that they're actually committing a crime. So it's important to relay as much information to the dispatcher as possible so that we can understand what crime that person has committed, and that somebody's willing to be a witness and willing to prosecute. The second question was, what rights do I have to protect myself and my property? Well, you have rights, definitely, within the state of North Carolina to protect yourself and your property. Now, those are outlined within North Carolina general statute, so I suggest that you research those. Like if you Google what rights do I have, it'll pop up with the general statutes there on self-defense and also property defense. If you have a specific scenario that you're concerned about, I would suggest that you get with your personal legal counsel to discuss that through, because we're definitely not attorneys. Number three, why is crime increasing? Well, there's a lot of factors, it's hard to nail it down to one. I talked about a second ago, the permissiveness of the environment for crime. That's one important factor. But there's so many different things that drive it. Like, for example, our catalytic converter thefts. We had a spike in those over the last 2 years because the cost of the minerals within those catalytic converters became really high. So that's when you had a lot of different vehicles that were targeted. And then you have, of course, when you have large encampments, and then you have drugs that are present. Especially methamphetamine use, it creates violent, unpredictable behavior. And we see it all the time on the streets, unfortunately. So that combined with folks that have serious addiction issues, whenever they run out of money to feed that addiction, they're gonna steal, they're gonna shoplift. And, like Pastor Woods said, we have folks that we've caught shoplifting, doing organized shoplifting with lists that they have in their hand. So because the dealer will give them a list of things to get, and then they'll take that back in order to get whatever drugs they're addicted to. And then also the permissive environment. So as far as trespassing letters go downtown, in order for us, like if somebody posts a sign for no trespassing on their business, we can enforce that, but we can only enforce that with the permission of the business owner. So there's approximately 398 different businesses, addresses within the central business district. Of those, only 20% have signs out and also have letters on file authorizing for us to charge trespass. The reason I say this is because one of the biggest complaints we get are folks that are sleeping in doorways, leaving needles and human waste behind and trash. We can't enforce that unless the property owner explains to us, we have a trespass letter on file, we want you to prosecute. So that's another thing that shows the permissive environment for crime within the business areas. Violent crime is on the rise both locally and nationally. So that is something that we're dealing with nationwide. And that's where we focus our efforts right now because of our low staffing. To put it in perspective for y'all, like right now on the streets of Asheville, there are 16 to 18 officers currently working. 3 to 4 years ago, there would be 30 right now. So I was hired with the police department in 1998. At that time, we had 145 officers. Fast forward to 2003, we upped it to 155 officers. Currently, we have 140 officers that are operationally ready to answer calls for service. So we're lower now than we were 20 to 25 years ago. And the city has grown since then. So it's important to understand that. And then there's broken windows theory. Whenever you have an area that looks unkept, unmanaged, unsupervised, crime expands in that area. And you see out every day what's happening out here, so you understand how that applies. So the next question was, what are the solutions? Well, for us in my purview, the solution is to restore police staffing. Whenever you have more presence, whenever you have more officers on foot, on bicycle, that broken windows theory goes away. You know, we're able to help keep the area clean and keep a police presence. Right now downtown, we have 2 officers and maybe 2 working extra. We used to have 10 to 12 officers, 8 that were full-time within our Charlie district, and then 2 to 3 extra that would work in the evening. So that's how much lower our numbers are. And another thing, it's not only just presence, but it's also relationship building. You know, a lot of folks know officers that have left and gone somewhere else. Those were, I think we lost something like 600 to 700 years of experience within the police department over our resignations. And I know the chief spoke about that last time, so I won't harp on that. But the most important thing is the relationship building, because it's when folks have a problem, they tend to reach out to somebody they know and trust. So when our staffing is increased, that gives us the opportunity to build more trust and restore public trust also. It's hard to do that when you're having to rush from call to call to call, because you know that there's 6 calls in the stack waiting for you once you clear the current call that you're on. Also, de-escalation takes time. We had a guy the other night at 40 Merriman Avenue. He had warrants for his arrest, would not get in the car. And it took 7 officers about 30 minutes to de-escalate that guy. So proper de-escalation takes time, takes experienced officers, and it takes resources as well. Another part of that is, you know, we've done several operations over the last 8 months to target shoplifting, to target manhandling, graffiti, break-ins, shootings that we've had also across the city. However, whenever we do these operations, we have to pull officers from other parts of the city to do this. So if we're doing an operation downtown, that means Hall Creek doesn't have as much coverage. North Asheville doesn't have as much coverage. South Asheville, West Asheville, all these areas, we're having to pull resources in order to do these. These operations have been successful. We've made a lot of arrests, but the unintended consequence of that is crime can increase within those areas since those officers aren't there to respond to calls. The most important thing that we have to do is respond to 911 calls quickly. So a lot of folks ask, why do we pull officers from that downtown district? It's because in order to police equitably and fairly, we have to respond to all areas of the city within an adequate response time. And our response times have gone up over the last 2 to 3 years, so that's an issue. Also, we need to have prosecution. From all the way from the arrest to the prosecution has to be consistent. So it's something that we're working with the district attorney's office on. So the last things I'll touch on real quick are needles. We get complaints about needles, we see needles everywhere. We have needle exchanges, those are not needle exchanges. Yep. Those are needle giveaways. Yep. The last report 3 years ago was that one organization gave out 50,000 needles and only took in 10,000. And I venture to say that number's lower today. Yes. So I think as a city, as a county, and as a state, we need to do something to rein that in. Also, officer burnout. A lot of officers are working 16 hours a day on days consistently. So these officers are officers that haven't seen their families, that are working overtime just to try to make sure that our staffing is filled. And another thing is the same demands. Everybody wants officers everywhere, between communities, businesses, different areas that are having criminal issues. We're getting a consistent demand across the city to want to see more officers. So we're always aware that demand's there. And then, we try to support our community paramedics also, but they've been sold as kind of an answer, and they're getting burnout also, because there's only a handful of them. And it's important to understand that it has to be a partnership with everyone working together, because with this shift away from wanting policing, people have proposed other answers. Other organizations is not the answer. It's all of us working together to make everything safer.
Thank you, Kathleen. Next, we'll have Assistant City Manager Ben Woody. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you, everybody. I'm done. I'm actually gonna take it out. Can you guys hear me? Is that okay? First of all, Patty had asked me to talk about kind of private property issues, and I'm gonna touch on that a little bit, but I want to Captain Lamb covered a lot of information, so I'm actually gonna be pretty brief in my comments, and I know there's probably a lot of questions, and I actually kind of envision this being mostly a question and answer session, but I just want to say a couple of things. Pastor Woods, I want to thank you for what you do. I do appreciate that space you fill. Now, I just want to take a second on behalf of the city manager's office and the city council. I just want to acknowledge and thank the police department for what they're doing. It is tough, y'all, and they do great work. And there's a lot of police officers. There are 4 officers in this room that are leadership in that department that I am proud to work with, and I am thankful that they are here and they do what they do. Because I just want to recognize our police department and tell them thanks. It is truly a tough profession. So, and the other thing I want to piggyback on what you ended with, Captain Lamb, is I think that homelessness is it's a complex problem, right? It's multifaceted. And I do believe that the solution really has to be a community-based solution. It's supporting our police, it's supporting our community paramedic program that the county's standing up, which is fantastic. It's you as business owners having conversations like this, being involved, like understanding what you can do to be a part of the solution. I think it really, truly is gonna take, it's nonprofits, like it's what you're doing, Pastor Woods. We gotta pull it together and do it together. And I agree with you. I believe that there is a solution to the problem. I think it's gonna take a lot of work and time. And actually, I'm familiar with the Houston model, and I actually think that's a great model, and they've done good work in Houston. The one thing I'll just observe, and I'm gonna connect back to your comments, is they're able to produce affordable housing in Houston. For the developers in the room, I used to be in DSD, so y'all know this. Boy, it's easy to develop when it's flat, isn't it? It's a lot easier to produce housing more affordably. We have some challenging terrain and real housing challenges here in this community. So I think production of housing is a real challenge, but I think if we can continue to do that, that's gonna be helpful. A couple of things. It's interesting, maybe we can tease this out a little bit too. I've always heard there's enough shelter beds as well, but I am gonna say the city, along with partner, I think the county's involved. There is 2 housing projects that are moving forward. One is the old Days Inn that Homer Bound is doing, and one is the old hotel off Tunnel Road off, River? Yes, thank you. So those are both permanent supportive housing, and they'll bring on about 200 beds, I think, plus. And I think part of that thought is to try to create stability and get homeless individuals back into the workforce. And so I do think there is some housing in the future. Those are just the general comments I wanted to make. But real quickly on private property, and I'm going to send this to you, Patty. So we have a web page. It's pretty new, and it basically gives a series of contact information. So it gives a business owner, I'll focus on businesses, it gives you some options about how you can be part of the solution. It's interesting that you said only about 20% of our downtown businesses have some sort of no trespassing, I guess, sign in place or whatever, but we've got a really easy process where you can submit what's called a no trespassing letter. It's all gonna be on the webpage I'm gonna send you. That's a great first step to do to try to protect your property. I 100% agree with Captain Lamb. If you have an issue on your property, if somebody shows up, you should, number one, you should ask them to leave if you feel comfortable doing that. That's the first thing, tell them to leave. If they don't leave or you're not comfortable doing that, then you can call the police department. Don't call 911 unless there's a crime happening, but we have some tools in place to begin that process, if necessary, to trespass somebody. I'll make a couple of distinctions on that. If you own a business and there's a building on it and you're there and there's a manager and an owner, all this is a lot smoother because you're gonna submit the letter. You know, we've got places that you can call and begin to initiate that trespass. That tends to work pretty well. I think one thing where it's really challenging, and let me say this, ultimately the property owner is responsible for the managing and maintaining your property, right? So whether that property owner is you, whether it's the city, whether it's NCDOT, the railroad, the county, whoever it may be, the city of Asheville, you're responsible for managing your property. So you gotta kind of keep that baseline in mind. But if you need help, if you need guidance, and I do think the city can help direct you towards resources and processes that are available to you. One thing we did in the city manager's office is we have hired a part-time position. She's doing a great job to try to coordinate the city's response. So again, I'll have this on the website I send, but you know, you can send us an email or submit an actual app request if you're concerned about activities on your property. And this position can kind of help coordinate and point you in the right direction. So it's not always easy to navigate the city, right? Like I'll acknowledge that, but we're trying to make sure that we can provide resources to you to be responsive. Where it gets really challenging, and I'll take a second to talk about this, where it's challenging is when you have properties that are vacant. So let's say that you have a vacant property, no building, and you know, whether it's campers, individuals, whatever it may be, I think that's where we start to have some challenges. Because remember what I said earlier, in order to maintain property, you have to have the active participation of the property owner. That is so important, particularly if we get to a point where we need to involve APD. Like we have to have that. And so if the property's vacant, then we have to go find that property owner, right? And again, that's something the city can help with, but you know, when you have properties that are in a trust, or you know, maybe whoever owns it's a grandchild that lives in California, it can be challenging to try to manage, you know, encampments or issues that are happening on private properties. But all that to say, what I want to kind of close with is, with your participation as a private property owner, I do think we can be of assistance and try to help you manage issues. So I'm probably gonna stop there, and I'm sure we'll get a lot of great questions that'll prompt other responses. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Woody. Okay, next we have John Carroll, business property owner and real estate expert in town. John?
Thank you. My mic on? Okay. I've often said, if you're gonna solve a problem, it has to cost people money. And it's costing you money now. Did you hear me? This problem is costing you money now. I don't deal in affordable housing, so the people that I have relationships with are people who don't want to lose money by buying real estate in Asheville. And as you know, the real estate has gotten quite expensive in Asheville, hasn't it? I mean, we have a real problem in being able to have property that a lot of people can afford. But when I have people coming here and buying a condominium downtown that costs over $1 million, they don't wanna walk out the door and see people who are homeless laying on the street, do they? So I have people that want to come here, but they say, well, Asheville has gotten too trashy for me to make the investment of buying property in Asheville. Now that all of a sudden, now that translates into something that says that this costs people money. So we have to do something about that in order to protect your property values. Everybody in here owns property in Buncombe County, right? Sure. Okay, if you want to protect your property value, this is a problem that is eventually going to cost you your property values. I have people who have come to my office, and my office is at 1 North Pack Square. I'm in the heart of downtown Asheville, selling real estate every day, okay? I have to keep my door locked in order to keep the homeless people out of my office. They'll come in there and they'll steal anything they can get their hands on. A purse, a computer, laptop, whatever, so there you go. So is that good for me as a business person to operate a business in downtown Asheville? The answer is no, it's not good. I mean, I've been in the real estate business 50 years in this town. I've seen it go from a dead downtown to a vibrant downtown to a lawless downtown. And that's where we are. We're in a lawless downtown. And I've never had to lock my front door on my office to sell real estate. Did you hear that?
Well,
I have to lock my door to keep people out and try to sell real estate. Now, what we have is we have to have a plan. If we don't have a plan, we're not gonna solve the problem. And I think it's not a political problem, and I think some people try to make this a political problem. And the politicians in the room, listen to what I'm saying. This is not a political problem. It's not this party against that party, or this person who's gonna run for this, or whatever. We're never gonna solve the problem by being an adversarial situation. I was on the Buncombe County Board of Education for 8 years, and the big discussion then was, who's gonna get the next new high school? Well, the only way we solved the problem was get this community not to be fighting against this other community to get the next high school. If you look around Buncombe County today, you're gonna see a lot of new schools. When I was chairman of the Buncombe County Board of Education, Buncombe County schools ranked one of the 12th most dilapidated school systems in the nation. Did you hear that? 1980, when I was chairman of the board, we were the 12th most dilapidated school. So we had to come up with a plan to solve the problem. And that plan was, we need a 0.5 cent out of this local sales tax in perpetuity. But we came up with a plan, and how did we do it? We didn't have Inca fighting with North Buncombe and, whatever, for the next high school. We had a community that decided that they wanted to get together to solve this problem. But now, when this problem costs you money at your home, when you sell it, you will then recognize we need to get something done about this. But now, the problem that we're gonna have is that train has already left the station. And it's difficult to back the train up into the station and get to solve the problem. If you go, I have clients that come here from Portland, Oregon. Get this? Came here to try to get away from homelessness. Can you believe that? They said that the reason why they're moving out of Portland is because the homeless have left downtown and they're now moving out into the communities outside of downtown. Does that sound like, maybe we might have a problem here where the homelessness, now they're not camped out in the people's yards, they're just breaking in their homes. And the reason is because they got more assets out there and there's less police out there, and so as a result, it's more vulnerable. So that's what's happening in Portland. I had a client that came into, I had a friend of mine who runs a real estate office downtown. He had a person come in his office and said, I'm from California and I'm moving to Asheville to get away from this homeless situation. He walked out of the office and went across the street and a homeless person spit in his face. Guess what the guy did? He said, I'm not moving to Asheville. So, it's happening every day. My clients who are saying they want to buy property in Buncombe County, they're saying, I'm moving to Black Mountain. I want to buy investment property in Black Mountain because it seems like, that's what Asheville used to be in Black Mountain, but without the homeless problem. So, you see, so there you go, your money's leaving town. I'm gonna leave it at that.
Thank you, John.
Questions?
Thanks so much.